So continuing our examination of the documents issued at the time of birth from the hospital, in your case was in Northern Rhodesia at the time,
Yes.
you've drawn attention to the unusual typography on the name.
Absolutely, because it's written in all capital letters, all uppercase. And then what's quite interesting, why I'm saying it's not a birth certificate, although it says birth certificate written here, if you look at the document carefully, you will see that it's got a number at the top, and here it says stocked Registrar General Livingstone. What does stocked mean? Stock means it's been sold as stocks in the stock exchange. Then there's obviously the British emblem, and then written birth certificate in huge big bold letters.
Yes.
And anything written in big bold letters stands out, and nothing can stand in if it's standing out. So in grammar, it's off the page.
Yes.
Which means it's purely a stock certificate with a number on it. It's not a birth certificate, because technically in grammar you can't read that. And that's not a language that's in English either. That is Dog Latin or Ancient Latin or whatever, Big Latin. You can't read English like that. That's a hieroglyphic text.
And the information pertaining to the stock is written in normal.
Yes, yeah. And then the name obviously all capitalized. And then the surname, apart from being so far removed from the name in spacing, which means it's not normal type reading, you can't read with such a big gap in between, it means it's two separate entities. So there's obviously one done in the name and a separate one done in the surname, so there's probably two different trust accounts. Yeah. And then the surname for some reason is underlined. Now underlining, normally when we went to school and we made a balls up with something that we did, the teacher would go and they would draw a line under our errors and the mistakes that we made. And this is where forms come in. Anything written on a line means it's an error to be corrected. And that's why the family name or surname is underlined, which makes it pretty interesting. And then it says further that it is a true extract from the Register of Births kept at Livingstone. And what makes it really interesting is that it's an extract from records kept at Livingstone. So it's not the record. That's why the actual record got sold. It's not a copy of the record. It's a copy, a document that got created from the record that the hospital sold. And there sits the first birth trust, which is the one created from the live born date. And what happens is that the hospital sell that bond the third day after the baby is born, and whoever buys it waits for the information from the parents when they go and they register the child, and then they marry those two things together and they create different entities in commerce. And that's why I referred to the other document, how they explained how that works and where money actually comes from. A system of debits and credits.
You're referring there to the letter that was sent to you?
Yeah. We are the bonded surety against which the money in circulation is printed. So we bond it by a thing called currency or fiat currency. And in reality there is no money, as they explained to you rightfully. There's only debits and credits. Now, in accounting you'll never find the term money popping up anywhere. They only ever talk about debits and credits, which means there is no money, because money comes from coins or metal, and you can't do money in notes. And you know what's happening with us with Federal Reserve notes at the moment. So the money aspect is a very interesting one. But technically where the money comes from, we create the money, we are the security, we are the collateral against which the money is printed. The only interesting thing is that no one knew about it. At the time that it happened, it was all done fraudulently and by deception. And if the parents knew exactly what was happening, that they've signed the child over to the state, and they're no longer the parents anymore, and that this child is now enslaved by contract, by agreement, under fraud, for the rest of his life, I don't think any sane parent would actually ever go and register their child. So we're looking at the citizenship and how we became members of countries, and actually not a member of a country but a member of a corporation, and that we don't actually live on the planet or on the earth of the soil that we find ourselves on, because we've been captured in maritime since birth, and we're still floating as a vessel in maritime on the open waters of the sea, lost forever, until we claim back our standing on the land and our correct status as living humans, living men and women, and that we can get our DNA sorted out, claim our DNA, and claim our names back, claim our Christianity back, or the Christian side to the name, and then claim back our global estate, which is our inheritance. Because somehow you might recall that you never signed a contract to live on the planet and pay for it. You never entered such a contract. So how come all of us have to every single day earn money so that we can carry on living? And if we don't earn money, we'll die, we'll starve. Unless you know how to look after yourself and you're off the grid and you plant food, and you do that whole lot. So just a quick one on the names again. This is a certificate of citizenship for South Africa. As a South African citizen, I'm a South African citizen and I'm a New Zealand citizen. And here you will see the name that they used is probably a good name with his surname attached to it, written in normal letters. No uppercase writing whatsoever. But it's a corporation, the Republic of South Africa, that has incorporated that living entity into the corporation, not the all caps, which is rather interesting. But that's Africa. That's what happened there. Now we've got the the New Zealand one, and here we go, very happily, citizen of New Zealand, thank you for becoming a citizen, blah 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 blah, and it says, dear 𝒹𝒶𝒹. So again, just a little bit of extra spacing between the name and the surname. Not that there is a surname, but they've attached one to the surname, because I don't have a surname, nobody has. And this is the appointment, and then you need to do the little ceremony and say, wow, you know, I swear to King this and Queen this and whatever. You do the citizenship ceremony, and guess what else? Here it goes. And who takes the oath? The all caps entity takes the oath, not me.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And these are the words you must read off when you do your citizen's oath. But similar to court procedures, you're only ever the corporation or the assumed corporate entity.
Yes.
In maritime, in all uppercase text. So how can an all uppercase text entity take an oath? How can a corporation take an oath? Can a corporation sit on this chair? Can a corporation stand in front of a judge? No. But they make you believe that you are that entity in all uppercase. Okay. So that one took the oath. And let's have a look at who got the certificate. Bloody hell. What happened here? Who's that entity? All uppercase?
Yes.
And whose name is on the certificate?
That's in title case.
That's in title case. And the interesting thing is, the surname or the family name, place name, has been detached by writing it in bold.
Yes.
It's not in normal text, it's in bold. And the whole rest of the certificate, whatever is important on there is written in bold. Only the name stands on it, and the rest is in italics and in different languages. And this is just a piece of art. It's a work of art.
Containing symbols?
Containing symbols, containing different text, little birds and things, little island here called New Zealand. But what's interesting, it's got a seal on it, which is an authentic seal, printed into the paper, so it is a certificate, and it's been created into a bond. And there is the bond number. So here again is another account created.
That they can trade.
That has been traded upon and that has been monetized. And the entity here does not exist.
Well, I think that's an important point. Although a lot of people refer repeatedly to the birth certificate, it is not the only document that's traded.
No. Every single thing that you've applied for and that you've written your surname on by signing on behalf of the surname, every single time in your life since you were born that you wrote your name and signed a signature, that has been monetized. Every time you have a little slip at a pay point or in a bank, anywhere that your signature appears, that signature has been monetized. And that document that you signed on has been used and a bond has been created. And that's real. So what makes it interesting, the word signature refers to a sign of nature.
Yes.
That's not you. It's a similarity or a simulation of your nature. It's not who you are. Your autograph, on the other hand, is a graph of your autonomy. And AU is a beautiful word. AU is in Australia, AU. It's a very old word because A, E, I, O, U, the vowels, the 5 of them, any combination of 2 of them are very powerful words. Earth is another one. Moon is another one. Very powerful when 2 of those things are combined next to each other. They make the most powerful words in the universe.
How do they carry such power? Where does the power display itself?
Because
the effect it has on people when they hear those words?
All animals, all mammals on planet Earth can pronounce each and every one of them. Doesn't matter which one it is. Any animal can actually speak by using those 5 vowels. All animal sounds contain all 5 of those vowels. In other words, with us as humans, or as men and women, we've got the animal nature within us, and technically we can speak to animals and speak with animals, and they should technically be able to understand us if we learn how to use the vowels that they're using, but the ones they're using are the 5. So animals speak and humans speak. When it comes to vowels, those are the powerful ones. And then the way that they created the I, E, O, U, the I is this one here. The O is the circle, the 360-degree circle. The U is the holder of the things. You see, so each letter in the alphabet has got incredibly deep symbolism attached to it. So that's why they're powerful words when you combine them into any particular word. Moon, Australia, AU, and AU happens to be the symbol for gold, which is also interesting. And AU is an authority. AU is an authorship. And it's a very powerful word, because whoever's got the authority is the ruler. Hey, it's the one that's got the A and the U and the A. So this makes it incredibly interesting. And in terms of the whole idea of signature and autograph, until you've learned what your name really is and how to write it correctly, you have never been addressed by anybody correctly since you were born. Every document that's come through your mailbox, every document that's come into your life has never been addressed to you, because they don't have a contract with you. They've got an assumed contract, and that assumed contract consists of one particular thing. In commerce and in contract law, silence is consent. And because you never spoke out, you never used your declaratory power of your voice to say something, it's assumed that you said yes. And this comes to the rescission of vows and the cancelling of your contracts. It's an action step, it's a physical thing that you need to get off your butt and go and do. And rescind those contracts, cancel those contracts, but you need to speak out. And again, speak. EA, the element of earth in it, out. OU. Okay, so here we go with the vowels again. Action. It's got IO at the end of it again. That's something that's busy moving. Something's happening. And we need to learn how to use those words and then combine them with our deeds. And then go and do something called what I refer to as a live life claim, which is the recording of your name correctly, and also claiming your DNA and your ancestral DNA. And that's the interesting thing, because while we call it a live life claim, if you don't lay a claim to your life, someone else will, and someone else has. So until you actually claim your own life back for yourself, your life will never be yours.
Now, I believe you have in your possession a very important document in the form of a printed letter that arrived into your email inbox. This relates to your questions or concerns to a number of organisations around the world pertaining to your belief that there is no law.
There is no law. Absolutely, you're correct. Yes.
You had, shall we say, a lot of difficulty getting any response whatsoever from anyone. However, you did receive one reply, which I believe was actually quite a lengthy email that did, to a fair extent, answer your questions or concerns.
It didn't answer my questions and didn't address any of my concerns whatsoever. But I'll quickly go into a little bit of background about it. And it's quite a powerful thing that happened in my life.
Yes.
Just quick background. I had a bird, which has got nothing to do with this story.
A pet bird?
A pet bird, a little parrot. Little
Yes.
Connie. It was very sweet. His name was Sweetie. And this bird had the habit of on and off, when you just touch him and stroke his head and scratch him and whatever, he would just give you a nip and he bite, and he was bloody sore. And then obviously once he's misbehaved, we put him back in his cage. But we got him as a mistreated bird, as a pet, from somebody that didn't want him anymore. And every single time we put this bird back in his cage, he would say 2 words. As he gets onto his little perch, he would say, "Fuck this." So obviously he's bitten the previous people so many times that he actually learned the behavior. So he would bite you, he'll say, "Oh hell, this isn't on." And you put him in his cage and he hops onto his little perch and he puffs himself up and says, "Fuck this." So I got to a stage where I said, "Fuck this." Something is wrong, something is obviously, it's the bird. Those are the wisest words I've ever heard. Came from a bird. So I just said, okay, let's have a good look at the system and let's see what the hell is going on. And I wrote a series of documents and questions and reported crimes. If I say crimes, wow, not your normal crime. Things that you know in the world that's happening right all the time. Today, in Australia, what's happening in Australia? How come there's a foreign entity in control of this country, beautiful country, that's a corporation operating under commerce, not law, and a colour of law, as a private American company running people's lives. Everybody getting up every day, working, money, taxes, and then they die. And then that gets monetized, it never bloody ends. So I said, let's end this thing, let's see where this thing goes. So I reported these crimes, and I said to them, once they're made aware of the crimes, they become complicit by doing nothing about it. And I'm going to just read off this a bit, which is all I have to do. So all the institutions and individuals are now complicit, including the ones that replied, except that one of them didn't reply but gave a solution, but will do nothing about the crimes themselves, as they confirmed to me that there is absolutely no law whatsoever. So out of a number of institutions, and I didn't expect any of them to give a shit, because normally what they do, they take whatever you give them, they put it in the bin or the paper shredder, and they just vacate, and life goes on. They will never fess up or take liability. Now these guys didn't take on the liability either. But what happened, which I did not expect, is that there's going to be a reply, and I didn't expect the reply to be what it was. So it's rather complex, and I'll read off the names and not the details, because it's addresses and irrelevant information for the sake of the exercise, to show that there's nobody out there that cares or will do anything whatsoever to protect anybody. No government, no court, no organization, and definitely no law. There is no law. It's something that we really need to let it sink in. There's only commerce, and there's only commerce in contract, and there's only contract by consent. So what I'm saying is that there might be one law, which is consent law, but it's up to you to decide whether that law applies to your life or not. But that's the only law. There's nothing else. There's commerce and there's consent, and this is it. So okay, so we wrote to the Director General of the Universal Postal Union. All right, they are somewhere in Bern, Switzerland. Then we wrote to His Holiness Pope Francis. Okay, we all know who that is. Then I wrote to Callan and Rogers, the Senior Registrar of the High Court of Australia. I wrote to the Registrar of the Brisbane Magistrates Court. I wrote to Australian Government Solicitors. That's the group that does all the prosecutions on behalf of the state. If you've got shit with a traffic fine, you'll have Australian Government Solicitors as the prosecution. I wrote to them. I wrote to the International Criminal Court, which is in The Hague, in the Netherlands. And then I thought it's not such a bad idea to let Interpol know, because they're supposedly the international organization policing the planet and telling everybody what's right and what's wrong. So let's chat to them as well. And then to an interesting group called the Tort Division. Now, not many people know about the Tort Division, but you can Google it.
Tort as in T-O-R-T.
T-O-R-T. Tort law. Tort law is an interesting aspect of law. I'm not a lawyer. I can't say much about it. You can talk to the Tort Division directly. But yet tort law is a fascinating aspect of law. And there's a thing called a tort division, which means that if there's a crime committed, and it's really a problem, you do not go to the police, because they will do nothing about the crime. They're operating in commerce. They can only find somebody guilty, take them to a court, impose a prison sentence, which becomes a prison bond, which gets commercialized, or they can get somebody that goes to court, pays a fine, found guilty of the crime, and then that fine gets commercialized. And how that commercialization works is they take the instrument, which becomes a debt instrument, your signature is on it, that's converted into a bond, and that gets floated into the stock exchange as currency to create more public debt. And this is the system we trapped in, called fiat currency. But it's all in commerce, not in law. Anyway, so here we go. I replied to all these guys. I sent them this letter and I said, okay, what are you guys going to do about it? Now, out of it, some of the interesting replies from the only institution that bothered to reply. They missed the point completely about whether law exists or not, but they replied with more than I expected. Now, in the reply, the way that they did, they told me there is no law, but they couldn't spell it out. But the way they put it across, it became very, very clear that there's only one thing, which is commerce. Okay, so here we go. The first bit came that, if I'm understanding this correctly, now this is somebody writing to me in an email. You want to do something about government entities using your name, the name in all caps, to create accounts to make money in commerce and make you responsible for violating their company employee bylaws, statutes and regulations that they call law. Interesting. First, unless you created the my name trust as the creator, and you are a trustee, or you are a beneficiary, which is who we all are, you cannot liquidate any accounts or take possession of anything belonging to the trust. If you have property that is in a public name, attached to a social security number or debtor's employee identification number, then according to the law, now here they mention the word law, you only have the right to possess them because your original birth certificate contracted ownership of your property to the government for privileges. Not rights, privileges. Even though you did not personally do it, or that it was done by a means of fraud, does not change it when you claim to know the truth. Bloody hell. Okay, so it was done by means of fraud. That's quite clear, now we know the truth. But there's shit all you can do about it, the fact that you know the truth. Because it doesn't...
You've discovered the truth too late?
No. It doesn't change the system whatsoever whether it was fraud or not. Because there's no law. Okay. This is what they're telling us.
So they cannot be prosecuted for fraud?
No. It is a contract that has not been disputed.
Yes.
A fraudulent contract that has not been disputed since its creation, 3 days after you were born. That's when the hospital bond got sold and got created, before the child got registered. You must prove that the contract is fraud, and you must do it yourself and undo it. And part of that, and this is very interesting, is getting an administrative court decision to agree with you that you can handle your own affairs. In other words, you must prove yourself. So, there we go. It's an administrative court decision. It doesn't mean it's a court order. It seems to be a decision made outside of court. So this looks to me like something called a private settlement, or something very similar.
At this point, we want to address a somewhat critical issue of the 𝒹𝒃𝒃𝒃 trust account. It is a major part of why people are involving themselves in this field of research. It's a critical aspect of people being able to free themselves from the system and go from the public to the private. Now, You've given me some information which I believe comes from the Vatican Law Book.
Yes.
Specifically, I'm referring to Canon Law 2057, which pertains to the 𝒹𝒃𝒃𝒃𝒃 Trust and how the Vatican is supposed to act or conduct themselves when they are approached by a person who is, in fact, leaving the system to go private.
That's correct. The Vatican, of course, is the VAT ICANN, which is the holder of all corporations. The Crown Corporation, any corporation on planet Earth, is incorporated with the Vatican as the holder of all corporate estates, and all corporate trusts are held by the Vatican as an institution. The Vatican is not a person or anything, it's just another huge big corporation, but it is the mother company holding all the other corporations. And obviously this Canon 2057, anybody can just Google that and look it up, and you'll find heaps and heaps of references to it, and it's also off the Vatican website.
Well, I might actually read to the viewers what Canon Law 2057 states, and then I might get your further opinions on the matter.
Very interesting.
Specifically, what it says is, quote, any administrator or executor that refuses to immediately dissolve a 𝒹𝒃𝒃𝒃𝒃 trust upon a person establishing their status and competency is guilty of fraud and fundamental breach of their fiduciary duties, requiring their immediate removal and punishment.
Yes. Now, this is quite interesting, because there's a particular word here that pops up which says is guilty of fraud and fundamental breach of their fiduciary duties. Now, let's forget about the fraud for now. The fiduciary duty means your interest need to be put in front of their own. So if somebody is my fiduciary, they've got to meet my needs before I can meet my own needs. They've got to look after me.
That entails a sense of responsibility
Absolutely.
on their part towards you.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So government, or the private institution pretending to be a government, they took on the fiduciary duty, and they usurped the original government that actually was a de jure government that exists, that did all of that for us. But as trustees of the trust, they've got a duty towards us. And everything that we are paying for all the time should be coming from the trust fund that was created, as with them as the trustees, to pay for all our bills, all our fines, all the licensing, all the taxes. It's not our obligation. Those are their bills that they need to pay, not us. But they made us the debtor in the system through the birth certificate fraud, and out of that came the surname, which is the debtor in the trust account, which is what all this writing of how to write your name, the live life claim, and this complete process is all about.
So the trustee holds those fiduciary duties
Absolutely.
and responsibilities
Yes.
towards you as a
Yes.
person exiting the public system into the private.
Absolutely, they hold that all the time, even if you don't exit the system from the private. But they, because of the role playing in court that they do, the magistrate is your fiduciary, but he reverses the role and he makes us the trustee. You see, because when they ask you what is your name, and you say your name, they write your name down on the court records in full, all capitals, all uppercase typing, which is not you, that's the corporation, and that is the trick that has been done in the court. Now, that's been covered very well by Romley and by the Rossa channel in the past. People can go back and relook at those videos. This is just the 𝒹𝒃𝒃𝒃𝒃 Act itself. Obviously, that still looks like this. This is off the England's UK website. You can still look this one up. It's still legit. It's still standing. It's still valid. Absolutely 100%. And Section 4 is the interesting one. Section 4 says, if the supposed dead man proved to be alive, then the title is revested. Action for mean profits with interest. And this is where the Canon 2057 comes in, and where the fraud comes in. Because these assets in trust, all the time that were held in trust, those assets are me and you. Our bodies, our corpses, our corporate entity has been held in trust as a bonded surety against which the currency in the system is being printed. So we are the collateral against the money that we spend all the time. We are the capital. And they traded upon our bodies and converted that energy into money that they profited from. they did stuff with that money without telling us about it and traded upon our trust accounts, the profits that they made from those accounts should have been coming to us all the time as shareholders in the global estate. The minerals from the Australian mines should be come back into Australian soil. Do they? No. The garbage that gets exported to China and that we buy back from China as newly produced goods, why don't we produce it here? That is the whole system. Is that you've got a foreign entity similar to a parasite sitting on top of Australian soil, sucking it dry. But we are responsible for that. We created that. We consented to that. But we can change it. We can take that contract and rescind it, cancel the contract, create a new trust, and in that case we will be looking at the next document, which is very interesting, with the steps of how to do that.
So we've discovered that the format or the manner in which a person's name, an individual's name, is written is crucial or critical to identifying who that person is.
Yes, that's correct.
Now you have some methodology or some process or procedure for, what would you say, recreating, reclaiming a person's true identity?
Yes.
And that is the document you refer to as the Live Life Claim?
That's correct. Like I said, if you don't claim your own life, someone else will. It's as simple as that. If you don't have a claim to something, someone else will take it from you. In other words, if you've got a very cute little dog like a little Maltese poodle and you don't have a title to it and you don't have the proof of ownership to it, I will claim it from you and I will actually get a court to give it to me, although it's your dog. You see, because we live in a commercial world where everything is on documents and on pieces of paper. So if you don't claim your poodle and you don't get the title deeds to it and you hold it and you own it, the dog is actually not yours as far as I'm concerned, if I want to take it. And this is what they do to all of us. It's if you can't prove that you own something or that something is yours, what are you going to do about it? You know, somebody just took your dog. Now, are you going to, once I've taken your dog, how are you going to prove that it's yours? Because I've now got it. And then in commerce and in law, they go with this bullshit that, you know, ownership is 80% or 90% of property or blah, blah, blah. You know, there's all sorts of things that's connotated to it in terms of commercial transactions and universal commercial codes. But in reality, we all know that what is yours. But in the world we're living in, you need to be able to protect yourself and remove yourself out of the jurisdiction of fake authorities like corporations. They've got no authority over you whatsoever. But you don't owe any document whatsoever that's got your real name on it. It's an official document, and that's a contract. Now, a contract is an interesting thing, because a contract means it's got to be clear, it's got to be transparent, there must be nothing hidden in it, everybody must agree about it, must be correctly autographed, not signed, but autographed.
With disclosure.
Yes, with disclosure, and there must be witnesses. And then the contract is worthless if it hasn't been registered and it hasn't been recorded as a contract. And that should be the thing that you put your name on. You should have a contract drawn up that has got your name on it with witnesses, written in the correct language, in the correct grammar, and that would be your Live Life Claim, and that would become the number for your personal private estate.
So this requires more than a person simply declaring themselves.
Yes.
To be free.
Yes.
This requires more than a person simply self-identifying as outside the system,
Correct.
post-liminary,
Yeah.
off the grid.
Yes.
So the Live Life Claim creates, would you say, a paper trail? When you say these things need to be recorded, there
Correct.
needs to be witnesses, there
Yes.
needs to be autographs.
Right. Yeah. You see, with your driver license, with your passport, with your gun license, your whatever license that they want to see when you're doing any transaction, you want to buy anything from a shop or get credit from a bank, they're all on documents. None of those things bear any witnesses on them. It's just your signature usually that's on it, no one else's. First of all, and then secondly, the names that's put on there is not yet the name of the corporation. Your name is never written correctly on any official document. It can't be written correctly. Now, with a Live Life Claim, what people often say is, what will a correctly drawn up and correctly designed live, life, claim do for you? It'll do absolutely nothing for you whatsoever. But how you use it, and if you really know what it is and you've done it correctly, it will be the most important document that you've ever created in your life.
So you would create the document, then you would perhaps distribute it to various organizations, corporations, governments to notify them?
This is the interesting thing. They will not accept it because there's no jurisdiction between the living entity and the corporation. So I will ask the court or the police or whoever, I've got a live, life, claim, look at it, you know, this is my private identity. They don't give a shit about my private identity. They don't want me to be private. They want me to pretend I'm a corporation, or that you know, I'm assuming some form of standing under them, whatever. So in that sense, no, it's exactly the opposite. And there comes copyright, because a lot of people don't know what copyright really is. Now, the little copyright symbol that is used, a little circle with a little C in it.
Yes.
If I do a beautiful piece of artwork and I claim it as copyrighted, and I have it copyrighted, and then I put a little C symbol on my beautiful painting, well, I've just made that crown property. That's what that little copyright symbol means. When something is copyrighted, it is not yours, and you don't own the copyright to whatever you think is copyrighted. That's the International Maritime Copyright Law. That's the Crown Corporation symbol. So we don't even know how to copyright stuff so that it's truly copyrighted. So all you need to do is you need to create it yourself, and you need to write in handwriting properly, using the correct grammar and the correct sentence structure, copyright copy claim below whatever you've done, and put your autograph there, and now you own the copyright, because you created it yourself and you claim the copyright to yourself, and now you own it, and now that is your copyright. Now your autograph is the graph of your authority, and nobody can do my autograph for me. Nobody can sign my signature for me, but the signature being a simulation, the autograph is the real thing. And why would I say that? Would anybody go up to Madonna or to any star out there somehow, pop star, movie star, whatever, and ask them for their signature? Hell no. You want their autograph?
Yes.
Wow, okay. Now why would that be? Because that's more valuable. That is a graph of their autonomy, of their authority. You don't want their signature. Governments and corporations and banks and things want signatures because it's a simulation, it's fake, it's fiction.
Whereas an autograph might
absolutely
display more uniqueness.
Yes, correct. It's absolutely unique is the beautiful part. Because again, it's got the beautiful U in the beginning, and at the end it's got another U and an E. You see, it's a combination of those vowels again. It's a beautiful word, unique. It's authentic, it's unique, it's real, and that makes the big difference in there.
So you may be saying that people can extricate themselves from a system or a system of slavery.
Yeah.
Simply they don't currently or presently know the correct process, procedure, step by step.
They don't know that, but apart from that, before you can do that, you need to know what your name is. And previously, with previous work that Glass Channel has done, that has been explained beautifully. Again, that if you don't know what your name is, you lost. Eh? If a man does not know his name, he's truly lost. You need to know what your name is, and you need to know how to use your name.
Well, that introduces the concept of the definition of the idiot.
Yes, correct. Yeah, that's correct. So it's important to know your name. And to know your name, we start with a funny thing called sentence structure, the combination of words into a sentence, and how to do it correctly. That the first thing must be first, and then after that must come the second and the third and the fourth. So there's a value in how you put your name together. And the first bit of your name has got to be within the personal knowledge, and it has got to be the first thing. So the first part of your name would obviously be your first name, your given name, or your Christian name. Whichever label you want to attach to those, but that should be number one. Number two, if you've got a second name or a middle name or a third name or whatever, that's also good. And then you don't have a surname. There is no such thing. The sooner you detach yourself from the surname, because that represents the debtor in the trust account, and that is the sins of our fathers that we've inherited, all their debt we've inherited, all the things they've done to us and the predecessors have done to us, the scars we've built up through generations of enslavery. We're almost stuck in a point where we are semi-automatically obeying authority because of the surname.
And through force of habit.
Absolutely, yeah. Because when you sign your name, it would just be your initials and then your full surname. You would never just sign your name and actually put your name in the way that you do your signature. Now, there comes the part that I will cover just now, which is called cursive writing. There's two ways of writing. The one is to print properly in letters independently from each other, which is how you write your autograph. The other one is to do it in cursive writing, where you join the letters in a flowing, fluid movement. Now, what flows?
Well, ink does.
And water.
Water.
You're in maritime. So, cursive writing is cursed. That's why they call it cursive writing. And it's as simple as that. So you should never, ever, ever write in cursive writing. But we've been taught how to do it in school. Which means we've gone through government training of how to actually write. They said you must write it like this, and then off we go, and we'll write it like this. But you cannot write in cursive. Cursive is cursed. It says it in the word. Why would they call it cursive writing if it's not cursed? So yeah, that's the interesting thing. So first of all, you need to dump the surname, detach from it. You can call yourself from the clan or from the tribe, if you want family maybe. But family is related to animal husbandry and to farming, or to what is familiar to you, which is okay. A lot of people like the idea of the family. That's good. Of the house is pretty good, which refers to the place you came from or the house that you're born into. So under common law, the house is a pretty good one to say, whoever from whatever house. Like Queen Elizabeth is from the House of Windsor. That's how she writes stuff and would often express it. And the media would even say that at some point in time of Windsor, Elizabeth of Windsor. The Duke of, Canterbury. Wow, that's interesting. You see, because they do it correctly. And that's why they did it, because they're royalty. What does royal mean? Oh, it's got a couple of vowels in there, hey. Royal means real. That's as simple as that. There's nothing royal. It's just real. But they've deceived us through writing it and making it royal and making it different from you and me, because they're royal and we're not. So what they are saying in real language is that they are real and we are not. They live in reality because they know what their names are. And we got programmed not knowing what our names are.
Looking more closely at the grammatical deception involved in all of this, what would be your opinions or comments on the way that all capitals signify corporations? Whether we are referring to what some people would say is a government or a person. Give us your overview of the way in which the capital letters, the uppercase, Dog Latin, the glossa,
the grammatical deception. Yep. Okay. Now, first of all, this is on the internet, or from the internet. It is the Australian government's page from the Treasury, and it's pretty current. It's today's date, and this will show you documents relating to registration with the Security and Exchange Commission of the Australian government as a privately owned American company. And this is pretty interesting, because here it is, clearly stating that
documents relating to registration with the SEC of the Australian government as a privately owned American company.
Yep. Now, how the hell did that happen? That the government is a privately owned American company, and it's on the government Treasury's website off the page.
I was going to ask you to clarify, what website are you reading from?
Treasury.government.au. Straight ahead. So now it's corporate. There is no government. Government obviously means, govern means to control, and ment means mind. So government equals mind control. It's got no authority. It's got nothing to do with real authority. Real authority is vested in something under common law called a jury. And a jury would be a group of guys, maybe like 10 people, that make a decision, and that decision that they make should be unanimous. In other words, if one of the 10 doesn't agree with the outcome, there's no decision. And that's different from democracy. Democracy is that's mob rule. That's what pirates do on a ship when they select a new captain. 6 guys says we want that guy, and 4 says no ways, but it doesn't matter, because 6 is a bigger number than 4. And this is what they deceived us, that we've all got the right to vote and the right to democracy. Democracy is bullshit. There's no such thing. It's a lynch mob. And the world fell for it, hook, line and sinkers. With, we can vote, let's choose a government, let's do this. What we didn't know, there is no government, it was just a corporation. Just a privately owned American company, which has happened since 1933 across the planet with every country on earth except, I think, North Korea and Iran at the moment are the only 2 remaining independents, as I mentioned earlier at some point. So this incorporates all of us as citizens of a country? Like what? How can you be a citizen of a country under a government when the government is an American company? There's something wrong with this picture. So you aren't a citizen of anything. You're a citizen, you're a member of a corporation. That is what your citizenship means. And interestingly enough, what does the word ship mean? Any guess?
Well, you may be referring to a vessel.
In maritime. There we go. You see, anything attached to a ship, like relationship, citizenship, friendship, whatever. The reason they call that ship thing at the end is because the bloody thing can sink. You're on the water. You're not on land. And so anything that you're doing to do with a ship is clearly written in maritime and clearly written in water law. Now this is where the all caps entity comes from, because you can't interact as a living being or a man, a woman, with a corporation or a dead corpse, because it's like you in the backyard and you're kicking a dead dog and you want this thing to get up and run. It ain't going to do it, it can't. But yet they want us to think that we are able to interact with a corporation. You can't interact with a corporation, there's no jurisdiction. But you have to consent, and you've got to, under deceptive grammar, rules of grammar, use of grammar, you've got to pretend that you are the corporation and you're acting on behalf of the corporation. And that is what they did with the bond, the birth bond, is to bond you into slavery and to sell that document as a bonded stock. That's why they call the stock exchange stocks and bonds. We are the stock that's bonded on the stock exchange. But they need to use a different name from who we really are. They can't use our real name, our Christian name, or our first name, give a name, because it's not the name of a corporation. So they incorporated our name, used that entity in a different way of writing it in all capital letters, all uppercase text. And they've told all of us that this is who you are, that's your identity, that's your identity document, that's your passport, that's your driver license, that's your gun license, whatever, which was all bullshit. It never ever had anything to do with you. That is the name of a corporation that is completely and separate from you. The interesting thing of it is that, do you have an interest in that corporation? Well, I suppose so, because you're using your lifetime and your life sweat working, not knowing that you are not that entity. So you're being harvested. You're being traded upon, slaved, enslaved, bonded without your consent, without transparent, without disclosure. Because if there's in a contract no full transparency, no real disclosure, the contract is null and void.
Yes.
So technically, all the birth certificate bonds that were created, that our parents so lovingly thought they're doing it for God and country or whatever, all of that at the end of the day is bullshit, and all of it is fraudulent. The interesting thing is it's very hard to prove that, because who knows? How can you remember when you were 1 week old, maybe, or 3 days old, what happened?
No, of course not.
No, and my parents are dead. So where's the witness? Okay, how has this been conveyed to us? So we're on our own. We need to go into this mission and search for the truth, search for the reality, and in that way eventually we'll get to the bottom of this rabbit hole, and then we can fix it. And it's easier to fix than what most people think. Not that I'm saying everybody should go and do this. You need to do a lot of research, and nobody must ever believe a word I'm saying. Okay?
Yes, but you're referring to the possibility of an escape, or, for want of a better term,
to get out of the control of government entities, or out of the authority which they don't have over us without our consent.
Is this the same as going post-liminary or attaining a post-liminary status?
It's exactly the same as post-liminary status, except that the post-liminary concept is beautiful because you're just saying that you're not choosing sides. I'm neutral. This is a war out there. These people are engaged in commerce. They're competing. They're fighting against each other. And they're killing each other. And they're hurting a lot of people. And all you do when you go post-liminary says, I don't want to play. I'm neutral. I'm peaceful. I'm neutral. I'm non-belligerent. And this is me. Okay? So you do whatever you want. I do not choose sides. And that way is the only way to change the system 100%, is to walk away from the two polarities, left wing, right wing, okay? Doesn't the left and the right wing belong to the same bird?
Yes, it would be seen by some as the two wings of the one bird.
Yeah, and when you vote, you register to vote, which is rather interesting, because doesn't matter which party you vote for, it's just a new CEO of the same company. There's nothing else out there. In all the corporations, it's just companies that you're voting for. And they tell it you clearly, and this is where everything is hidden in plain sight. They tell you in the advertisements before election, and this country is going into election soon, they say to you clearly on the media and TV and everywhere, register to vote. Or to vote, register. What it means, if your name is on the voters roll, you have voted. They tell you, register to vote. You don't have to vote. Register to vote. So once you've registered to vote, you've incorporated yourself into the corporation. You're part and parcel of that company. Doesn't matter who you vote for, because it's the same entity. You just have to register with the company as an employee of that company. So we are all government employed as far as government is concerned. None of us are, even if you're working for a company, how many companies on earth are there? If you think very carefully, it's a trick question. If you think about businesses and things out there, how many companies are there on the planet?
Well, there would be tens of thousands, potentially millions, depending on the size of the company you're referring to.
There's one single company.
One.
The Crown Corporation. It's the only real company.
Across.
Every single other one of them that is registered as a company has forfeited those assets to the Crown Corporations. The Crown controls all of that. There's no such thing as an independent business. You can't be in business as an independent. You can be in trade, but you cannot be in commerce. Because trade is private and commerce is public. Commerce is government and trade is outside of government. And trade works on donations and fees, not on prices. So if I would be charging you a fee to do this interview with me, that would be completely, totally out of commerce 100%. Because it's a fee that we agree upon. And if you don't want to pay that fee, then there's no agreement. Or you can give me a donation, and that is up to you how much you want to give me. But the interesting thing is there's no price attached to what I do. And that takes you out of commerce. But as long as you're still talking pricing and you're still talking selling stuff, we're screwed.
Now, the topic we want to revisit is the crucial issue of the birth certificate as it is issued at the hospital at the time of birth.
Yes, that would be the certificate of born, life born certificate, not the birth certificate, which is the one created by the hospital, which is just the hospital records, what time was the baby born, how much did the baby weigh, what condition the baby was in, did the baby need to be kept in intensive care for a day or two, was it underweight, all the records about the baby.
Now, are they...
All that has been monetized.
They've been monetized, but that is a document that, as a general rule, doesn't get released to the parents.
They often give the parents a copy of it if the parents ask for it, depending on how nice the hospital is, how busy they are or whatever. But usually not. All of that goes into a thing what they call your medical file.
Yes.
Like your doctor, my dentist, everybody's got my file somewhere, all the x-rays, things about me. I don't personally have it. I know it's out there, and I've looked at it, and we've discussed it, but I don't own those records. So they sell those records from the life-born aspect of the baby. That gets sold, and that usually gets bought by either the Vatican or by government entities, and that becomes a bond.
And it is separate to the document commonly known as the birth certificate.
Completely separate. The birth certificate is the one where the birth gets registered and the name of the baby gets recorded and made known to the rest of the world. It becomes a record. The hospital record is the internal one, just with the medical details of the baby, which is when the baby was born and not birthed. And that's the interesting thing. So there's two different trusts here that gets created. The one is the one in the hospital that gets converted into a trust, and then the birth registration one gets converted into a different trust. That one is usually a government one. But the initial one is most of the time a Vatican one. Now what makes this interesting, I'll just show this for our viewers. This is the birth certificate. There's not many of them around.
This is a copy of your own birth certificate?
My own birth certificate. This one is a British birth certificate, because where I was born in northern Rhodesia, which is now Zambia, that was at that point in time was a British colony.
Yes.
So this is a birth certificate, which was done by the registration of the birth. Now I've got a very interesting document, which I will disclose at some point in time, all of the contents. At this point we'll just cover some aspect of it. And why I'm saying that the hospitals sell that hospital record and people don't know about it, because this information got given to me in a very unusual way, and it became made known to me, and this is the first time that I can actually share this with the rest of the outside world.
But you have known about this information for some time yourself?
I knew about it, but I couldn't put my finger on it. But from the response that I got from questions that I asked into the system, this answer came back to me, and I'll just read from the document. And how the bonds work and how the trust accounts work, because we all know there's a secret trust somewhere, somehow. Where does money come from? How does money work? And then the entities that sent me this information, I can't disclose who they are for privacy reasons, but I can tell people about the contents of it. So I can't tell you who wrote the document, but I can tell you what's in it. So I'm happy to do that.
Yes.
And it goes like this. The way commerce was set up many years ago is that there is no legal tender in the hands of people any longer. Due to there not being any legal tender in circulation, there had to be a system put into circulation that would allow debt to be paid, which is we now have the debt system of credit in place. So there's only debits and credits.
Yes.
When your birth certificate was publicly recorded 3 days after your birth, the corporate entity was established, as I'm sure you already know.
Is there any significance to the 3 days, the 72
Yes.
hours?
The 3 days is the days that Christ took to wake up from the grave. That's the 72-hour period in commerce. The 3 days is pretty important. Everything works on a 72-hour basis in commerce. And there's always a 3 days for this and 3 days for that. Within 3 days you'll see it on your court records, your documents, whatever. So the 3 is the pretty interesting number. And in numerology, I won't go on the whole lot, but in Masonic numbers, obviously, 1 means man, 2 means action, and 3 means God. So that is the 3-day number. So after 3 days, something becomes known. And actually what they do is to see whether the child will still be alive after 3 days. So in which case, if the child didn't live for 3 days, he's probably not going to make it, or there could be complications. So they wait for 3 days, and usually when people die, there's very often the request that they do not be buried or cremated within 3 days, so that the spirit can leave the body. Now that's in certain cultures and customs and religions. It's not a universal principle, but you'll often come across that people don't want to be buried straight away the same day that they die. In certain cultures they do, but very often your funeral parlors, everybody would wait for 3 days, and there's a reason for that. And here comes the 3-day principle. But interesting that they mentioned to me, as I'm sure that you already know. So this entity is not yours, and never has been yours. The entity that they created. The form with the details of the born baby on it is not yours. The hospital created that. And I couldn't, because it was a baby. I didn't even know what the hell was going on around me. So between my parents and the hospital, there was a form of an agreement, something that they consented to, information that they volunteered, which would include their names, their surnames, their details. and that got monetized and created into a bond, and that got sold into the government and into the Vatican system. You were only made the collateral for it. Your birth mother gave permission to the government to handle all of your commercial affairs and pay all your debts. And in return, you received benefits. These benefits include, but are not limited to, education, medical treatment, driver's licenses, etc. And in return, they get to profit from handling your commercial affairs. Just because they put your name on the accounts doesn't mean it's yours. They own the corporate entity, the corporate trust attached to your birth certificate that was created 3 days after you were born. And funnily enough, not many people register their babies 3 days after they were born. It's usually a week or 2 weeks or maybe a month later, whenever they get round to doing it, which makes all of this pretty interesting. So yeah, there we have it. There's a trust account being created. The birth bond has been monetized by the hospital and sold in, and that is where money comes from. So that baby has then been taken into possession, placed into maritime, converted into an asset that is being traded on the stock exchange globally, and that is where the money comes from. And that baby or child will grow up and for the rest of his life be monetized and enslaved by an agreement made between the hospital and the parents. In maritime,
without the baby having any say, of course.
And without the parents knowing what's happening, because it's done by deception.
Yes.
They didn't know when they go to a hospital that the hospital is a ship. It's a dock and a dry vessel belonging to an international private organization as a foundling hospital for abandoned goods. That's why they call it a maternity hospital. Matter is matter. Pattern is pattern. So the father gives the pattern to the child, and the mother creates the matter. Only females can create matter. Fathers can't.
I can sense it's a very heartfelt topic for you.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Now, to get back to that document just quickly, the one you read from,
yes,
you can't divulge at this stage where that information came from. Somebody has written to you.
Yes, I asked a lot of questions. We'll cover this at a separate stage. If I do it now, it will take us another hour or two maybe to go through the whole document. It's a very interesting document.
But I'm assuming you sent out questions to a series of people, for example, within government.
Yes.
Generally, you didn't receive much response, but somebody did write back.
Well, I didn't expect a response at all, because usually what they do is they just put the stuff in the paper shredder. You know, they can't reply to you because you're asking questions from a dead entity. You know, you're asking a corporation to disclose information to you. No, they've got no obligation to do so. It's a private company. What's it got to do with me? What they do with my records? You know, it's not my records. I don't own them. So I just kept on asking questions. And I sent all these questions out into the world globally. If I say globally, I'm talking about the whole planet, not necessarily Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. And I didn't expect to get a response from anybody. And
but you did receive one response.
I got one of these entities coming back to me. And they didn't solve my problems for me. They didn't answer my questions. But they told me what to do and how everything works, which I did not expect. Now, interestingly enough, the birth bond, or born bond, that looks like. This is the British one from Mother England, not UK, because UK is a corporation, but this is a British birth certificate with the crown, the Queen under the crown. And then, if you would look at the name written, it would be Quibus, and then my parents' surname, my father's family name, or the place that my father came from. And if you look at the spacing between the two words, you'll see that there's a huge gap in between. That's not normal typing. And that's already been written into all capital letters. And this is not the birth registration certificate. This is the born certificate from the hospital. This is where the certificate comes from. And this makes it very interesting. And then if you look at the way that it's been written in all capital letters, all uppercase, Where did that come from? That's the bond.
Welcome back, everybody. We want to take a further look at the correct format or formulation, the way in which names are written. So, Corbus, if you could perhaps give us an indication of how you would write your name, or how you feel names need to be written to be correctly addressed to the person, to the individual.
Great, we'll discuss the name correctly. First of all, if anybody would want to do a live life claim, the wording on that claim has got to be in the correct way and in the correct structure, in correct language. Now, what I'm discussing is not necessarily the use of the English language or a grammar lesson or a lesson in quantum language, because English is not my language and I'm not a quantum expert. We will be giving our details of quantum experts at some point in time, which people are welcome to follow and learn more about quantum. It's a bitch of a language to master. The people that are really good at it spend around 2,000 hours to learn exactly how quantum works and what it's all about and how to do contracts and use quantum correctly. It's not something that anybody can just do out of the blue and say, oh, it's a new language like Spanish or Latin or whatever. No, quantum is a tough one. But once you've done that, you'll be able to write contracts and to use words and to use paper and documents in a way that nobody will trespass on what you create on your documents. And the most interesting aspect in all of it is a funny thing called a colon. And this is what the colon looks like. It's a full colon, meaning that the two dots are not just one, it's not a semicolon, and it's just two little dots on a piece of paper. Now what these two little dots mean is they separate things and they make things factual. Now it means that anything that is written before and after a colon is separated or becomes a fact. And people say, yeah, but how can it be that important? How can somebody put something behind a colon and how does that make it a fact? Now when we look at a watch or a time, the way that time is written, you'll see that the hours and the seconds are separated by a colon.
Yes.
Now why would that be? That makes the second a fact. And because they change all the time, it keeps them a fact as they change. So that would be the hour and those would be the seconds, and it's the correct way in which time is portrayed globally, internationally, in any language, in any number. That is basically the format for time. So anything after a colon becomes a fact. Now when it comes to our names and the way we write our names on a live life claim, if you would have a normal name, just not that I think John is normal, but just to use any name, John would normally print his name like this. Now writing a name like this in print would also be the same wording that John would use when he uses his autograph. Now printing and cursive writing is different. Cursive writing is fluent writing where the letters are being joined together continuously, as in current or flowing, which is maritime, which is cursive, and cursive means it's cursed. So John wouldn't like to write his name anymore after he's done his live life claim by using cursive writing. He would be printing his name like this, but this is not correct. Now should John have a second name or a middle name apart from his Christian name, he would be writing it like this. Should his second name or middle name be Michael, he would be writing John and then a hyphen in between, and then Michael will be written in lowercase.
All in lowercase?
Yes.
Whereas the John, as I can see what you're holding up to the camera, we see capital J at the beginning of the name John,
yes,
hyphen Michael, all lowercase.
Because a second name is not a name, it's a second name. It's part of a name, but it's not a name, it's a middle name. Therefore you cannot write the other names apart from your Christian name starting with a capital letter. That is incorrect, because which one that won't actually be the first of the two. So this joins the two words together by putting the hyphen in between. Okay. So this would be John Michael, if this is John's name. Now, I'll leave the surname off, because nobody's got a surname. There is no such thing as a surname. There is a place name where you came from, or the house that you were born into, or the family that you came from, should you want to use that. But a surname in commerce represents the debtor in the trust account. And on your birth certificate, where the portion comes in where your name is written in, there's no surname written in there that's connected to your name. Somebody else connected that surname to your name, it was not you. And that is the entrapment through the birth certificate fraud, is to link the surname to the given name and make it as if we do have a thing attached to our name. You do not have a thing attached to your name because it's only your name. Surname is something that's got nothing to do with you. Your parents might have had a surname, or your father actually had a surname, but you do not have a surname. A surname is something that you accepted by contract or by deception, and you started to use it. But there is no surname that can be attached to a name other than through your own doing. And again, it comes back to the age-old thing of consent. And until you don't know about this, obviously you'll just go along with it. Oh, yes, surname, because it asks you on the form, what's your surname? Well, you just take that form and you change that surname and you just scratch it off or you leave it out. Because there's no law in the universe that says that you must have a name, or there's no law in the universe that says you must have a surname. So how come they ask us to do that? Because that is where we consent and we give away the information. And then basically that becomes contractual because we're putting that into a form. But yet, the surname, the sooner you get rid of the surname and stop using the surname, the sooner you're going to get out of commerce and back into being a creditor in your life. The surname is the debtor in all situations.
And in your experience, it would be rare for anyone to address you correctly. For example, when correspondence arrives into your letterbox at your home address, have you ever experienced somebody correctly formulating your name in print?
Yes, I have, but from friends and from people that have studied this with me and from people that have got live life claims, because I don't let anybody into my life that doesn't have a live life claim, because anybody not having a live life claim is contracted to the world of the dead. They're living entities, but they haven't claimed their lives as being alive, because in the corporate industry we are all treated as born still and born dead, and our death certificates are created for us when we were born, and they are treating us with no soul whatsoever, with no life whatsoever, which is why a living man cannot be in a court. It's impossible for a living entity to be in a court. You have to be there as a corporation or representing a corpse or a corporation, and that's that. So,
and this study or this learning is derived from quantum?
Yes, predominantly quantum, and also just from anybody that's got a bit of background, what I would say maybe in the Masonic industry or in the occult, that there's certain procedures in courts and there's certain methodologies of how to write, but they didn't teach us the stuff in school.
So is this research derived from quantum researchers, or are quantum researchers exposing a Masonic system?
Yes, absolutely. Quantum research is actually the best language that any contract should be written into. And I believe on a very high level, quantum has always been there and always been used. And this comes back in old writings and old text on buildings and things. You'll see stuff written in quantum. Quantum is also almost the language of maritime, which makes it interesting as well, because maritime has been there since, people talk about the ancient mariner. There's been vessels always. Earth is a vessel in space. A piece of paper is a vessel in space. The sun is a vessel in space. Everything is actually taking place in maritime all the time as vessels moving around or standing still, but basically it's all maritime. And quantum regulates all of that, but in the correct way, which makes it interesting. So if John would be writing his name just as John, that is incorrect, because it doesn't mean that his name is a fact. So by putting a full colon or a colon in front of the word John, John becomes a fact. So the colon in sentence structure means for John or for the John. But the interesting thing is John hasn't closed his name.
There's no period or full stop at the end.
No, it's completely open. So if this is on a form that John has filled in, I can go and I can put all sorts of stupid stuff and write it in behind his name, or use his name, because there's no closure. So John should close his name, and then he should put in behind his name a little full stop.
To create or bring closure.
Absolutely. Now John has closed his name and he's used his name correctly. So this can only mean for John. Period. not James or Cindy or anybody else. This means for John, period. Now anything that comes after this will be in sentence structure for John, and nothing then after that sentence can be for again. It has to be from or about, and that's the way that the name was written. So we'll go to the second part behind the John. If John would have a middle name, and we'd use it like that. Papers sometimes stick together for some reason. This would be John's middle name, John Michael, hyphenated like this.
Capital J for John, lowercase m for
like
Michael.
We said before.
Yes.
And if John would add his surname, it would be written like this.
A colon at the beginning, a colon after Michael,
yes.
And the two capital J's for John, and for the surname, family name Jones.
Absolutely. So this means for the John Michael of the house of Jones. Full stop, period. And that's that. This is the correct way.
So the issue of the use of the word sentence, again, what we are seeing here, what's being demonstrated, is multiple meanings of the one word.
Yes.
Yes.
Correct. Now,
hidden in plain sight, would you agree?
Absolutely, all the time. You see, we've never been shown this, we've never been told this, and they taught us different interpretations, different ways to write. As an example, all writing initially in the older languages and in the Eastern languages, all writing was usually done by the left hand, and the reason was that they would write from the right to the left.
Yes.
And they would write from the bottom upwards.
Yes.
And this is why in legislation and in Wikipedia and everywhere you do research, if you're looking for something, you go to the very last paragraph of whatever document you're busy working with, and the key of what you're researching will be at the end of the document, not somewhere in the beginning and not somewhere in the middle, because they have used and constructed documents and constructed sentences in such a way to tell us everything that we need to know. But the time that you're getting to the bottom of page 15, you've been indoctrinated with so many terminologies and things and whatever to deviate you off what you were actually really looking for. And the exit clause is always at the end. And then that's that. So in research and in encyclopedias and in dictionaries, everywhere they've been doing this all the time. Now obviously the question is, who are they? They are the ones that we created by buying their brands, going to their schools, consenting to their authority over us. And we didn't have much of a choice up to now. Now that we know more, we can change it, and we can rescind the contracts and withdraw the consent and take control of our own lives. So yeah, with the sentencing, when you construct the sentence, there's terms and conditions on any couple of words that you combine, because it's open to the interpretation of that sentence. As an idea, I might write down a sentence in a role play game in which I want you to run around this building 15 times every morning. And you might, if you're an athlete, think, oh, this is actually very brilliant. You know, it's not a problem whatsoever. But if you're in a wheelchair, that would be a really unfair thing to expect from you. You see, and this is what I'm saying with the terms and conditions. They have to be clear. And this is where the deception of language come in. Now we're sitting at a point where they tell us we need to run 15 flippant times around the house. And some of us are in wheelchairs, some of us have only got one leg, some of us are athletes, and we're all bound by the same thing, which is what happened. So yeah, we've deviated slightly off the name. But in essence, nobody can give a name to anybody else, because once you've done that, it was your intellectual property that you owned for the time while you're on earth, that is used by which you can be called. You may call me by that name, that's totally okay, but I do not give you my name, because when I do that I don't have my own, and then I'm nothing and nobody, which is what they do in court. When they do the role play in court, the magistrate asks you what's your name, and you say what's your name, and then they are skin crawlers, and they crawl into your side of it, and then he becomes you and you becomes him. And this is the role reversal that they do. This is how the courts work. Now obviously you must never be in a court as a living entity. You can't be in a court. We'll cover that at some point in time. But essentially the name is that critical, that once they know your name, you're screwed. It's over, it's done, because you've given your name away and you didn't have the right to do that. Now it's also why on the planet, as far as I know so far, and I don't speak extraterrestrial languages, I don't know what's happening in the rest of the universe, but there is no law yet on the planet that says that you must have a name whatsoever. And there's no law whatsoever that says that you must have a surname or a second name.
So they would, for example, contract with you, or deceive you, whatever terminology you choose to use, from that point of time, that early point in time when you're born, before you're capable of making your own decisions. You might be here, but you're not exactly with it, so to speak.
Yeah.
So this does in fact come back to the birth certificate being that trap at an early point in time.
That's correct, yeah. That's correct. So in my particular case, when I was born in Africa, in a country at that point in time known as Northern Rhodesia, which later became Zambia, it was a British colony. And at that point in time, obviously, what parents would normally do after a child is born. Now, born again, when I say born, I mean live born.
Yes.
The mother bore the baby and it got born through being live born, not birthed. Because birthing is shipping terminology. And this is another deceptive word. When I say birth, how do I spell the word? Is it B-I-R-T-H or B-E-R-T-H? How do you know when I use the word, what is your date of birth?
There may be an assumption on the part of the listener.
Yeah.
Obviously, B-E-R-T-H
Just what you think.
is maritime.
Yeah.
And B-I-R-T-H refers to
Correct.
a child leaving
Yeah.
its mother's
That's
surrogacy.
correct, yeah. But you don't know when they ask you over the phone for any security question and blah blah, which they do all the time, what is your date of birth? They're talking about the shipping term. They're talking about the birthing term. And the date of birth was only when the name got registered and the name got given out to the system and got recorded. And that's the interesting about the terminology using birth. We should be using the term born all the time. But what's very interesting, the mother obviously having given having a live-born baby in hospital after what she's gone through, she's filling in forms, they're taking temperature, they're taking blood samples from the baby, they're doing vaccinations, and at that stage she's not really in a competent position to do important shit on documents. But they do that because there's records in the hospital. Now, those hospital records get created into a bond, and they're normally sold to either government entities or they're sold to the Vatican. That is the hospital records. Now, what a lot of people don't know, all maternity hospitals are foundling hospitals.
Foundling hospitals.
Yes, foundling means a place where abandoned goods go to be discarded.
At which point somebody else can take ownership.
Correct.
That's what you're driving at.
Absolutely. So the child gets born, live born, and taken by the doctor being the guy that works for the shipping company. Which dock does he represent? And he takes the baby out of the water and holds it up so that it can't touch land and puts it into maritime. And therefore it becomes abandoned goods, to separate it away from the mother and then give it back again to the mother so that there's no bond. This is what happens in maternity hospitals. Now obviously it's a maternity ward, and a ward is isn't it like a prison term? When you're in a prison ward?
Well, you could be a ward of the state.
Correct. And this is what happens. So by the time it gets to the documentation, that whole scenario has played itself out to where the child becomes abandoned goods. And that gets claimed, and that gets recorded, and that record gets sold and gets monetized as goods abandoned and taken by somebody that gave it up and left it behind.
When you say the document becomes monetized,
hospital record,
is there a name for that process or procedure?
That would be the hospital record. That would be the hospital record. Very often they will give the parents a copy of it. And of course they want that copy, and they want those things, they either get it from the hospital or from the parents when you go and you register the child. Now of course what nobody knew, especially with the older generation and our parents as well, registering anything means it's not yours anymore.
Yes.
Absolutely. Anything that's registered it's goodbye ownership. It's not yours. You get the license to use it, and you become the holder and the looking after that item by law, but not universal law, by legality.
You are the holder, not the owner?
Correct, correct. So once the child is registered, the parents are just the custodians looking after the child. It's not their child anymore. And this is what happens with birth registration. So the hospital bond gets created, that gets monetized, and that gets bought and sold to usually the Vatican or some government entity that buys that, and they trade upon it. And then again, the records that's been made with a live born, nobody's claimed that baby, nobody gave the baby a name, nobody said no, I'm not filling in a form. And the way that the forms are filled in is putting the name into form, and that has been done deceptively as well, using terminologies and the way that it's been written on the documents in italics, in bold, in blocks, in different things that were ticked off. It's something that's pre-filled in. It's not a blank sheet of paper that the mother starts to write out. So it's built and designed as an entrapment, so that the way that it's filled in on that form, the mother has discarded the child, because she doesn't know about the four-corner rule and how to do English grammar properly and how to construct sentences, and she just filled in the blocks. And usually there's often a block where there's a little cross where you're supposed to fill in stuff. The cross means dead, it's been crossed out.
Yes.
Now, strangely enough, within the system, if you would go to the government entities and you would look at records of hospitals and records of births, deaths and marriages and death certificates, you will see that this birth certificate and the death certificate has got the exact same number.
Interesting.
So they issue the death certificate at birth.
Yes.
Because they created a dead entity in maritime, and that is what happened. And that very same certificate stays with you throughout your life and becomes your death certificate. It's the identical same certificate. And if this is not true, why would the certificates have the exact same number?